And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to show you how you can go about creating your first website using Google Sites, or your second website, or your third, or your fourth. It really does not matter because, regardless of your level of expertise, Google Sites, in essence, affords you the means of creating a website quite easily, seamlessly, and it affords you the means of creating a website that is visually pleasing and includes all the functionalities that you have become accustomed to on the web. And much of this includes also the affordances of the Google Suite. And so, without further ado, let's get started. So in order for you to get to Google Sites, you can, jump to Google. You could type in Google Sites, and it will bring you to the Google Sites page. You can also, if you're in your Gmail or if you're in Google, you can essentially, and if you are signed in to your Gmails, you can click on this grid at the top right that gives to you the Google Apps, and from there you could go to Drive. Google Drive is your virtual flash drive that you're able to use um, throughout the web. And if you go to new, you could scroll down to more and then choose Google Sites, which will then take you to the Google Sites page. Now, if this is your first time, Google is going to give you a space at the bottom that says, click here to start your first site. If it is not, then you could do the blank site from here. Google also has a template gallery that allows you to choose from different pre-built, pre-arranged templates. And so rather than creating a site from scratch, you could essentially choose from a template and fill that template in. Many students, for example, as they approach graduation from college or even high school, they might choose to build an ePortfolio. And so rather than creating a blank site, they would click on that ePortfolio, and just like that, Google essentially will create this ePortfolio site for them that they can then present to potential employers and other colleges and so forth and so on. Now, if you're new, if you haven't been using Google Sites, then Google will give you a tour of the different areas within Google Sites and how you go about setting your content on your page using the different blocks and options from within Google Site. And so you can, go through that tour if you're not familiar with Google Site. For our purposes, we're going to jump back to the beginning where we essentially will be building a site from scratch. So I'm just going to hit this back option here to go back to this main space, and I'm going to choose the blank template from here. And so Google starts you off in this new editor that Google has, because there is a classic editor that they started off with before that you can choose to use as well. With this new editor, Google starts you off with a header here, and think about this as the first page of your website that your users will see when they type in your domain name, your website.com. And so you want to think about a suitable title for your first page. And so if, let's say this is an e-portfolio, for example, you would probably start with your name here, and then maybe, e-portfolio, uh, or something along those lines. Now, notice that you have an affordance here of changing the type of heading, and so you don't have to essentially settle for what Google gives you here, if this should not be a title, maybe it's a subheading, for example, you could change that if you want it to be smaller. Or if you want it to be a little bit larger, it is a heading, for example, but not a title. That's fine. Or you could leave it as a title, but you also have the option of changing the text type to some look and feel that you want for your particular website. Most people will leave it as is, but you do have a host of different you know fonts here that you can choose from. You similar to Microsoft Word or some type of editing software, you have similar options here that you're already familiar with, right? And so you can go about uh, styling your um, styling your title here and the, the different options on this site based on using those tools that you are already familiar with. All right. Now, the best way to learn how to use Google Sites is to play around with the options, right? And so as you go through, you're going to find that each time you make changes on your website, each time you need to uh, complete a particular option, you're going to be experimenting with these tools as well, right? And this is going to essentially allow you to learn how to use these tools in the most effective way. All right. Notice here as well, when you click anywhere here, you're going to find a header type. So if you click on header type, currently it's set as a banner. And so your web page at the very top is a banner, but you could change that from it being a banner to maybe just a title if that's what you want, or maybe a larger banner, or maybe you want it to be a cover. I do see more and more websites now having covers as opposed to having banners because it presents the audience with an entire page at the top, as opposed to, and I'll show you an example here. It presents the audience with an entire page at the top of the website, as opposed to just a banner here and content, right? So it gives a visual overview of what is on that page or what is on that website, so the user can then choose to either explore additional content, explore what else is on this page, for example, or then move on to something else, right? But you can see how if this was a banner, then the banner would probably look something like this at the top, and then the other information appearing below, right? The cover most websites are gearing for no. And so you have the choice of having this be an entire cover or a large banner or just a regular banner or just a regular title. I'm going to leave it as cover for now, and I'm going to ensure that my website also has a name. This is important, and you'll see why. So I'm going to call it, my portfolio, for example, but you would give it some relevant name like your name, uh, just your first and last name, so that once that is done, you'll notice here, if I have several tabs open, look at that. Your user is able to navigate back to your site because your site has a name that is listed at the top of the browser, even after they have navigated away to somewhere else. All right. And so it's important that your site has a name. If you have a logo, if you have some picture that represents what your endeavor is here, then you could include that as well. You'll also notice that you have a change image option here. If you click on that, you're able to now select an image that Google has in its gallery. You could choose, any one of these images that are here that might suit the theme of your website, right? And so one of the things that Google is very good at is machine learning. And so, as you continue to use the tool, it learns from who you are and your own interests and styles and preferences. And so you might see that this available gallery here begins to conform and change to your own preferences and needs as well. If you're not satisfied with what is already here, then you can essentially change that to uploading one of your own content. So most people will go above and beyond, and they might not just use what they are afforded here, but they'll choose to have their own photos. And so you could choose from a list of photos that you have to represent your site. For example, if this is indeed an e-portfolio, so you might want to have some professional photo on your website of yourself, professionally dressed, because essentially the endeavor is to impress your prospective employer, right? And so you want to make sure you have a professional photo on the site. And so you can use these options. Now, if you're someone like me and you use Google Drive, if you're not using your local machine, then you could essentially go to your Google Drive because you're signed in, and from Google Drive, you're able to search for that picture wherever it is. All right. You could also search for an image via URL if you know exactly where that image rests on the web, or you could search for an image here using the Google search option. So quite a number of affordances, and of course you could search your album if you're using Google Photos with Google as well. Now here's why Google Sites is so powerful. You have so many drag and drop options that Google provides from the panel on the right. You could choose to essentially change the layout of the page that you already have by choosing content blocks. If you look at the content blocks here, you'll see an image preview that will provide an indication of what it will look like. And so you can choose the one that you essentially want. And then from there, you could choose to add text or images or whatever it is that you want to include in this section on your first page. I'm going to undo this because this essentially works very much like the office tools that we're accustomed to. And so I'm going to undo all of that. You can also Control Z to get back to where you were, and you could continue undoing. If this is a home page, it is prudent for you to have some content below, right? Rather than using the content blocks here, you could choose from the options that are here, or you could simply choose to include some text box to the area underneath, right? And so this text box will now allow you to type some information. I'll just put that in, some information about my website, why you're here, and why you should continue reviewing my information. All right, so you're going to include some information here on your website. If you had maybe an image that you wanted to include in here, you could add that here as well. To add that image, you would scroll all the way up to the section that says images. You would click on that, and depending on where the image is, if it is on your computer, then you would find that image in that specific location, open, and it will be inserted on the page for you. And then you have the option of resizing that image as well to suit the aesthetics of your page. You have the option of including additional text on that page if needs be. You have the option of including something like a document, from your Google Docs or Forms on here, Sheets, anything that is coming from your Google Suite, you could essentially provide on your first page. So your um, the onus is now on you to think about logically what should your page look like. This is your first page, and so what should this first page look like, and what type of information should I essentially have on my first page. One of the problems, and I'll be the first to admit, one of the problems that I have seen with Google Sites is that it is so easy for you to include dynamic forms of content that sometimes people go overboard when they're creating their website, right? There's so much on here. They go about creating this website and they include on there, the image carousel, for example, which might not be needed or might be better suited on another page. They go ahead and they include a YouTube video on there. And before you know it, the user, your audience, is turned off or not tuned into what you're really trying to present on your site, right? So think about what you're really trying to do. Think about your endeavor and the best means of getting the information across in the most simple but efficient ways. And so if it is useful to have a table of contents here, for example, then by all means go ahead and include your table of contents. If it is useful for you to include a YouTube video on the homepage, then by all means go ahead and include a YouTube video. All right. Now you'll notice that at the top here, this is where you normally find websites have a navigation bar that allows their audience to transition between their different pages. Right now, we only have one page, which is the home page, displaying home information. And so nothing else is here yet. In order for you to get that navigation bar, you're going to have to create new pages. So on the right, in the middle, at the top, if you click on pages, notice that it says home here. You could start by creating your second page. When you scroll over to that uh, plus icon here, it affords you even more options where it's not just a page that you could essentially include, but you could include a new link in here. It could be an embedded page somewhere, and even a new menu selection. Once more, we really don't want to go overboard, and so your best option is to create a new page like an about me page, since we're doing a sample portfolio here. So maybe an about me page, for example, and you'll notice now that the navigation bar starts to show because you now have more than one pages, and so you want to afford your audience the means of navigating between pages, right? You might want to include a contact me page. If this is an ePortfolio, you might want to include a page that has your work that you have done in college, maybe your best work, projects you have completed. And so maybe you'll have a page called Showcase, for example, or my work, for example, expertise, skills, for example, because if it's an portfolio, essentially it's like a resume, right? And so on your showcase page, you might choose to have different types of information on there. I wanted to also show this new menu selection because there might be times when you want to include a menu selection, because with your menu selection, essentially you could create this new menu selection. I'm going to say test, for example, and hit done. And you'll notice that it is in lowercase because what it is doing is it's adding a section to your page's URL path that will use the menu section name in all lowercase here, right? And so what this does is it allows you to move existing pages to the test section, for example, and the URL, this is the important piece, the URL will change for that page, and all favorites and bookmarks or even public search engine results will no longer link to that page, but it's going to link to the URL section. All right. And so you have the option of including that in there if needs be, and as you continue to build on your site. You'll also notice that, for a showcase page, for example, you could create sub pages. And so with a sub page, you might, include, let's say, projects you have done. You might want to have a page for projects. I'm going to add another sub page here. You might want to include maybe files, documents you have created, papers you have written that you got very good grades for, research you have done, presentations you have done, and you wanted to include those presentations here, and so you could include them on the showcase as well, right? You could also include, I'm going to add one more sub page here, and let's say you have acquired certificates. Maybe you have some type of award or scale acquisition. You've been recognized for some work that you did, and so you can include that on your certificates sub page as well. So you'll notice, when you scroll over to the showcase, it shows you the different pages excuse me, that you can work on, and then just clicking on any one of these will take you to that page. All right. If you click on any one of the navigation files here, it takes you to that sub page. Importantly, you'll notice these three dots top right. If you hover over it, it says more. If you click on that um, and scroll down to the version history, actually version history is right at the top, and so if you scroll to the version history, you'll notice in True Google Form you have the option of reverting to a prior version. And so in 2 months, if you realize that you were on the right track a month ago, and you wanted to revert to that version, you can simply go ahead and click on any of those changes that you made, and the site will revert to that version accordingly. You'll also note that as we include files and pages and text and objects and videos, you'll notice that it is saving each time you add anything here, right? And so that's also important. To the left of the more option, you have the settings feature, and this setting feature will allow you to now change how the navigation appears on the website. Right now, we have it set as transparent, and so any image that you have in the background, the navigation will simply appear on top of that image, right? The navigation itself is transparent, and so you only see the words on top of the image. Most people prefer it that way. But you could change that, right? If you wanted to have another feel to the website, you could change that to white, or you could change it to black. I'm leaving mine as transparent. It's also preferable to have the navigation on top and to the top right, but you could choose to change your navigation to the side as well. And so when we do that, you'll notice that you now have this show sidebar option to the left. If you click on that, then you get the showcase here. You'll also notice, and this is probably important, the preview option is right here. If you click on this preview option, it allows you to preview your site. This shows what your website will look like on the web, and specifically what will happen, when you click on your links and or your audience click on your links. To the bottom right, Google has also included these icons here that shows what your website will look like on other devices, like a tablet, for example. It is advisable that you go about, um, viewing each. So that you can make changes accordingly. So, for example, look at how your name ePortfolio looks if it's on a tablet, and I imagine on a phone it's not that bad, but on the tablet that's an issue, and so you might want to resize um, accordingly. I'm gonna close that to jump back to editing mode, and I would prefer to have my navigation bar at the top as opposed to at the left, right? So this essentially looks better than, to me, it looks better than at the side. You might have content on your first page here that you want to essentially, take up more space on the right, real estate, and so it might work out better if you have your content on the left. And then if you scroll down, here is where the rest of your content will appear. So we are essentially doing well. From here, obviously, next step is to work on the other pages, and you could click on a page from within the pages section to change that page. If you click on the navigation links here, that also takes you to particular pages. I would advise, since you're here, I would advise, just choosing different images for different pages. And I would also advise that since you are no longer on the home page, you could change the header type here now to a banner, right? So that when the user clicks on the About Me page, it now takes them, they can now see the content, right? Because you already have their interest. They're already clicking around. So you don't need that cover anymore. You could have a banner here, a large banner or a smaller type banner, right? And of course, you could change the image to an image that is probably now more consistent with who you are, right? We have um, a female image here, so this also works. And then from here, of course, if you jump back to the Insert tab, you're going to now be able to insert different things in the About Me page. Like, for example, you want to include a text box once more with information. You want to include now your YouTube video or some information you have in your Google Drive. Depending on your site and the type of information you'd like to portray, you'd go about editing each section accordingly. And you'll note that you could continue to do this, over and over and over, until you get to essentially what you want your site to look like. And so you're including images, you're including, videos, you're including even a calendar on here, you're including anything that is pertinent to your website. All right. And that goes for every single page that you have. I'm going to click on the Contact Me page, and I'd do the same here. I'd maybe change the image here to one that represents contact, and I would change my header type to a banner as well. And one of the things that I would do on uh, my contact me page is I would include a Google Forms. If you don't know how to use Google Forms, I do have a tutorial on Google Forms, so be sure to check that out. But I would include a Google Forms because, let's say this is a form I had already created. I do wish that there was an option here to simply create a new form from within here, but there isn't. And so what I would have to do is I would have to go into my drive space, and from within my drive space, I would then have to create a form, a Google form, right? And then that form will essentially show up and within this space here, and I'd be able to include that form. But let's just say that this is the form I would like to include on the contact me page, because quite often we might only have a personal number. Not all of us is using a Google Voice number, and so we might only have a personal number that we don't want to give out, right? And just including an email on a contact me page is not sufficient for an e-portfolio. And so we could simply include our forms in here that we have pre-created. And once you click on that, let me do that again. I might have done it quite fast. And by the way, if the tutorial is moving too fast, notice that within YouTube, so in YouTube, there is a gear icon at the bottom right of the video. If you click on that, you can essentially change the speed of the audio. So you could slow it down somewhat. All right. I'm going to jump back to insert and forms, and this is representing a form that I have already created. It's not a contact me form, but we're going to use it as one for the purposes of this exercise, and I'm going to hit insert at the bottom right after clicking on it, and Google will essentially insert the form for me here, right? And so you can, just imagine this is a form that would ask them to include their name, and then include maybe a text box that says why they're contacting you, and maybe even a phone number, an email that they can be reached at, and then a submit option at the end. And so if we preview that, here is what the form looks like on the web. And so they can essentially put their information in right afterwards. And essentially, this is how you would go about doing your pages, each page at a time. And this is fun, because you're actually creating your own website from scratch. So each page at a time, you would go about including the information that you need, pictures and content, and then changing accordingly. All right. You'll notice that on each page, it gives you an add footer option. The footer on the website is essentially the information that you're going to include at the bottom of your page. So copyright information as well, 2022, your name here. Uh, Maybe you might want to include, a number here, maybe a professional Facebook page. You could get things like your icons for Facebook in here as well, and so forth and so on. But any information that you want to include at the bottom of your website, you'll notice that it is showcased here, right? Now, if I should go back to my home page and scroll down, notice that it is also on my home page. And so I have this footer information at the bottom of every single page. And I could choose the pages that I don't want the footer to appear on by simply turning it off on those pages. All right, by going to those pages specifically and turning it off. My advice, go through all the different options here, test them out. You could undo as many times as you want to, so you won't break it. And then when you're done, you are now empowered to include the most efficient tools that you want to include on your website. One final thing is the themes option, because you can essentially change the theme of your website. We're using an image here, so not much will change for that image. But if you had like a banner with no image, you could essentially choose your own theme, change the colors for that here. The font style you could change as well for the entire site. You could change the overall look and feel of the site by choosing the different themes that you're given in here. All right. And you could include your own custom themes that essentially you have. So you do not need to simply rely on the aesthetics that it starts out with. All right, the preset aesthetics. You'll also notice for each page when you scroll down to each content area, you have things like a section color, and so you can change the styling of a particular section on your website by changing the colors here as well. All right. That way you don't have to rely on what it looked like in the beginning. You're able to change all of that. You're able to go through and change all of that throughout the website. Right. And so you're now creating a professional website using Google Sites. This tutorial is a beginner's tutorial. It's simply showing you how to create your pages, how to get content on the website, and then how you go about choosing the most effective options to include content, even content that is dynamic on those pages. Most importantly is your navigation and getting the right types of content on your website. Once you're done, you're going to hit publish, and publish will now allow you to publish your website to the web. You'll notice the web address here says https sites.google.com, and so if this is my, I think we said your name. Let's take a look. The home page, your name, ePortfolio, and so if you had your name in there, you can't space on the web because the way in which devices are able to find your website is by going through all the different elements here, right? The IP address. These actually represent numbers, believe it or not. But if there's a space there, if you typed your space and then name, when the device got to your, it wouldn't continue searching because that space means that it has ended the URL. And so what Google is going to do whenever you hit space, it's going to put a dash there instead. This is already taken. Unfortunately, it won't be if it is your own specific name. It shouldn't, right? But it could be your name one, your name two, your name three, or one your name, something along those lines. All right. So let's say ePortfolio. See, I don't think that would be taken, and then essentially publish. Notice under manage who can view my site. Anyone. That is fine because you want anyone to be able to view your site, but you could change that to only specific people as well. All right. If that's the case, you're the owner here. You could, it's a draft right now because I did not hit publish, but I could change that to anyone with the link and then publish, or I could remove that and just restrict it to specific persons. I'm gonna cancel because I'm not yet ready to publish this site. But when you're ready to publish, you can go ahead and publish. Now, if you don't want your site to say exactly what it did just now, when if you don't want it to have sites.google in there, but you only want your website to say, your name, eportfolio.com, for example, then what you can do is you can go to the settings gear. I'm moving fast once more. If you go to the settings option here, this gear icon, and click on that, and scroll down to where it says custom domains. Make your site easier to remember with a custom domain like yourdomain.com. You could go here to start the setup, and Google will take you to the Google domains where you're able to purchase a domain. It does not matter. Well, it does matter, but regardless of where you go to get a domain, you have to purchase a domain name. All right. And so you can buy a domain name from Google, or from Google Domains rather. You could search for the domain name you want, your name, ePortfolio, for example, uh, to see if it is available. And yes, it is available. So you would buy that. It is $12 per year. Some domain, registries, they might have um, uh, a 1 year promotion for like $6 a year, $2 a year. But after that, then the price goes up to like 14 or $16 a year. So it is up to you. And then of course, once you're done, let me jump back. Once you're done, you're going to have to point Google to, or point your website to that specific domain name. All right. Here concludes the tutorial. Be sure to experiment with your tools here. Be sure to create your pages and be sure to just style your navigation and content in ways that are most efficient for your website, your audience, and the type of information that you want to portray, not based on a host of options or affordances that just look good or are dynamic, right? It's most important that you're simply being effective by showcasing the information that you would like to portray. Thanks for joining me, and I hope that you will join me in the next tutorial where I'll show you exactly how you go about not just getting the domain name, but how you go about pointing your website to that domain name so that when persons include the domain name in the search in the URL bar, it will take them directly to your website.